Hey guys, tonight we're going back to a time of castles, cloaks, and questionable hygiene. Your new life as a medieval king. Picture this. Damp stone walls echo with the sound of trumpets. Incense curls into the air like nervous thoughts, and a bishop in an oversized mitre is about to press a crown onto your freshly shaven head. You're sweating under layers of velvet and symbolism, staring at a stained glass window that's older than your entire royal lineage. Welcome to the throne. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins before dawn, as monks shuffle into position with lit candles and vague expressions. You, half asleep, are ushered into a chilly cathedral where a sacred coronation ritual is about to unfold. You've barely processed breakfast, because, spoiler, there wasn't one. Your stomach growls audibly under the organ music. The bishop dips his thumb into holy oil, whispers Latin incantations, and draws a cross on your forehead. The crown, too heavy by the way, is lowered onto your head, pinching one ear and triggering an immediate headache. Nobles cheer, trumpets wail, doves are released and immediately poop on the altar. You're now king of insert realm here, sovereign of muddy roads, grumpy nobles, and that one leper who always wants a hug. Later in the Great Hall, your first royal breakfast is served on pewter platters. It's an experience. A hunk of salted pork, 3 wrinkled figs, stale trenchers of bread, and a weirdly gelatinous fish pie. Your food taster samples each bite with the resigned air of a man who's definitely been poisoned before. Across from you sits your Lord Chamberlain, who informs you you'll need to memorize 74 noble family names by this afternoon. He's also arranged a falconing demonstration to lift your spirits. Spoiler, it won't. You try to eat with dignity but end up gnawing a greasy sausage that squirts juice directly onto your coronation robes. So begins your reign. Greasy, awkward, and strangely fishy. As you sip watered wine and try to remember, which fork doesn't exist yet, because medieval, you're serenaded by a lute player who insists on rhyming destiny with pheasant knee. Nobles murmur politely, though half are mentally measuring their chances of overthrowing you. Historians still argue whether your line of succession was entirely legitimate, given the mysterious missing cousin, who vanished during a suspicious hunting accident involving a swan and a crossbow. After breakfast, you're escorted to the royal chapel for your first blessing as king. The incense is thick. A choir of boys sings a hymn that sounds suspiciously like last night's drinking song in Latin. You kneel for 27 consecutive minutes, your knees going numb as a monk lectures you about divine right and the importance of banning dancing. On Sundays, outside commoners cheer, waving flags they definitely didn't stitch themselves. You wave back with your gloved hand and accidentally slap your squire in the face. He doesn't flinch. Good lad. Back inside, your council assembles. The royal steward suggests doubling grain levies. Your spymaster casually mentions that your cousin has been meeting privately with the Duke of wherever. You pretend to understand politics while discreetly reaching for another fig. By mid-morning, you're exhausted, and you've only been king for like 3 hours. You're led through the winding halls of your castle where every room smells faintly of damp wool and cooked onions. Tapestries hang on the walls, most depicting people stabbing each other with lances while angels look on, bored. You're shown your private chamber, complete with a 4-poster bed, straw-stuffed mattress, and a curious chamber pot shaped like a lion. You'll later learn it growls when you lift the lid. Charming. In a rare quiet moment, you catch a glimpse of yourself in a polished bronze mirror. The crown's too big. Your cloak's already stained. But your eyes, bleary and overwhelmed, as they are, hold a glimmer of something new. You're not just some noble's second son anymore. You're a king. Probably one who's going to be excommunicated within the year, but still. That afternoon, a traveling astrologer arrives to cast your horoscope. He wears 12 rings, smells of roasted garlic, and tells you your Mars is ascendant in goat's breath. You nod solemnly while wondering if goat's breath is contagious. Before dinner, you sneak outside to walk the battlements. The wind cuts through your robes. Below, peasants go about their day, mending nets, shouting at sheep, and arguing over cabbage prices. For a moment, you envy them. Then you remember you have a personal falcon and a goose that plays the lute. Sort of. Night falls. Your first day as king comes to an end. You collapse into bed, crown off. You wake up to the clang of bells and the faint sound of someone chanting about St. Crispin. Your bed, stuffed with straw and something suspiciously lumpy, smells faintly of lavender and old goat. You blink against the early light and remember. Oh right, you're still king. And you've drooled a bit on your royal pillow. Nobody tells you kings do that. A servant helps you sit up. He bows, offers a basin of cold water, and begins describing your schedule in a tone usually reserved for funeral arrangements. First up, getting dressed. Not a quick affair. It's more performance art than practicality. 2 attendants arrive carrying an armful of fabrics and furs. There's a robe trimmed in ermine, hose dyed with crushed beetles, and a codpiece that looks like it could store at least 2 apples and a spoon. You reach for a relatively simple tunic, but your steward tisks politely. Today's wardrobe is for matters of court, which apparently means as many layers as physically possible. It takes 4 people to get you into your royal ensemble. First come the brays, basically medieval boxer shorts. Then linen undershirts, woolen hose, a doublet so tight it counts as armor, and finally the ceremonial cloak, which trails a full 6 feet behind you and must be fluffed by a designated page at all times. You try not to trip over it. You fail. Twice. Historians still argue whether medieval kings actually enjoyed this much ornamentation, or simply endured it under noble peer pressure. Regardless, you now resemble an elaborately iced cake with legs. You move awkwardly to the mirror, a polished metal disc hanging from the wall, and see a reflection that is part monarch, part migratory bird. Your crown is reaffixed by a chamberlain who smells vaguely of boiled leeks. You can't help but ask, is it always this warm? He doesn't answer, just pats your shoulders like you're about to walk into battle, which honestly feels about right. Next up, choosing your accessories. There's a belt of gold links, gloves made from baby deer hide, and a decorative dagger that's mostly just for show. Also, a pouch filled with dried rose petals to ward off bad humors. Your personal apothecary insists it works. He also once tried to sell you powdered unicorn hoof, so take that as you will. As you exit your chambers, the temperature changes by roughly 20 degrees. Castles aren't known for insulation. You're immediately hit by a blast of cold air and the scent of roast turnips drifting from the kitchens below. The floor beneath your soft leather shoes is stone, worn smooth by centuries of equally overdressed monarchs. You pass servants who freeze and bow, pages who scurry out of your way, and a jester who mutters something about your codpiece resembling a small siege tower. You raise an eyebrow. He bows lower. In the great hall, the court is already assembling. Nobles sit fidgeting, their clothing only marginally less ridiculous than yours. One baron wears a hat shaped like a swan. Another sports boots with curled toes so long they're tied to his knees with ribbons. You suddenly feel underdressed. Someone hands you the royal scepter. More symbolic than functional, though you consider using it to prop open a window. The herald clears his throat and begins announcing the day's agenda in a tone that suggests he once wanted to be an actor. You try to focus, but your inner thighs itch like they're plotting a rebellion of their own. Linen, as you've discovered, is not breathable. At least not when layered 8 times and bound with a woolen belt. You're called to preside over a minor dispute involving a goose, a cart, and a claim of sorcery. Yes, really. The goose in question is presented. It honks at you defiantly. You rule in favor of the cart owner and make a mental note to avoid poultry politics from here on out. Your queen makes her entrance, regal, composed, and gliding silently in slippers so soft they barely touch the flagstones. She gives you a polite nod. You attempt to smile, though your cheeks are slightly numb from the cold. A court bard immediately starts composing a song about your radiant union, which rhymes throne with bone, in a way that makes everyone uncomfortable. A messenger delivers a scroll reporting on the current fashion in the French court. Apparently green sleeves are out and damask is in. You nod solemnly and wonder whether anyone actually knows what Damask is. You certainly don't. Quirkily, your personal astrologer bursts in with an urgent report. Mars is now in opposition to Mercury, which means avoid pairs and sudden changes to furniture placement. You thank him and pretend to make a note. He bows, trips on his robe, and leaves. You suspect he's drunk on meat again. By the time the court session ends, you've been sitting on your throne for 3 hours. Your back hurts. Your legs are numb. Your codpiece has shifted alarmingly to the left. You rise with the slow creak of someone 3 times your age and signal the end of the morning's duties. Back in your chamber, the servants begin peeling the layers from your royal form, like a woolly onion. Your hose comes off with a worrying slurp. A page sneezes directly onto your slipper and tries to pretend he didn't. You forgive him. It's been a long morning for all involved. Your undergarments, once white, are now, let's say, battle-worn. They are whisked away to be boiled in rosemary water. You're handed a fresh tunic for your midday meal. Thankfully, only 3 layers this time. As you sit down for lunch, one question echoes in your mind. How did anyone survive in this much fabric? The sun is high by the time you make your royal descent into the council chamber. The air smells of dust, damp wool, and a faint whiff of pickled onions someone left under a tapestry weeks ago. It's time for your first proper court session. And, no, not the fun kind with jesters and pies. This is the serious stuff. Land disputes, title squabbles, and that one baron who keeps trying to turn your wine cellar into a fortress. You stride in, robe swishing, codpiece realigned, and take your seat on the slightly too high throne that requires an undignified little hop to mount. Your nobles are already waiting. 25 of them, each puffed up like an overcooked pudding draped in furs and egos. You try to remember their names. You manage 3. One of them is probably named Geoffrey. There's always a Geoffrey. The Lord Chancellor clears his throat with a noise like a dying goose and unrolls a scroll that looks like it's been used to wrap fish at some point. First order of business, he says. The dispute over the bishop's bridge pig. You blink. Welcome to ruling. Apparently, a bishop claims ownership of a particularly intelligent pig that wandered onto Sir Alric's land and now answers to the name Hamlet. Both men are deeply invested in the pig's affections. One insists it's blessed, the other says it was trained to kneel during Vespers. You, with your vast political experience, read 2 days of headaches, decree that the pig be shared. Monday through Wednesday with the bishop, Thursday through Saturday with Sir Alric, and Sundays free for reflection. Everyone nods solemnly. You wonder how long this will be remembered as the Treaty of Hamlet. Next comes a petition from Lady Dunsmuir, who claims her neighbor's cows have been whispering dark secrets to her. The steward begins to object, but you silence him. You want to hear this. Turns out the cows moo in patterns which she interprets as messages from St. Cuthbert. Historians still argue whether this event was early schizophrenia, a hoax, or an elaborate form of medieval performance art. Either way, you diplomatically assign a monk to investigate, preferably one who speaks fluent bovine. Throughout the session, your ears are assaulted by endless noble squabbles, sheep that cross borders, mills that steal wind from each other, and someone who wants the official right to host Wednesday cheese dances. You grant it mostly for the mental image. You try to stay focused, but the bench is hard. Your stomach is rumbling, and a baron in the back row keeps dozing off and snoring like a walrus with bronchitis. You toss a grape at him. It bounces off his bald spot. He jolts awake, bows, and pretends to take notes. You almost feel bad. Almost. Your queen arrives halfway through the session, gliding in with her entourage of whispering ladies and one small dog wearing a jewel-studded bonnet. You lock eyes briefly. Her expression says, "You've got this." Yours says, "I miss bacon." A herald enters with news from the northern frontier. A small village reports sightings of a 2-headed goose. Again, you order further investigation. It's probably just 2 geese in love. But still, these are the sorts of omens your people care about. Quirky, yes, but taken seriously. Between cases, you sip from a goblet of watered wine and consider how surreal your life has become. 2. Days ago you were simply His Highness Duke of Slightly Dampshire. Now you're a royal decision-maker for livestock drama and semi-possessed dairymaids. You're interrupted by Brother Thistlewick, the royal monk, who insists the calendar needs adjusting. Apparently, the moon weeps when the solstice aligns with lentils. You pretend to understand and refer the matter to the astrologer, who nods and promptly writes something on his palm in charcoal. In the middle of all this, a messenger rushes in, mud-splattered, out of breath, dramatically late. He kneels and presents a sealed scroll. The seal is unfamiliar. Everyone leans in. It's from the King of Navarre, he gasps. He wants to know your stance on fermented cabbage tariffs. You blink again. This is the price of power. You, deliberate with your counsel, half believe tariffs encourage internal markets. The other half just hate the smell of cabbage. You nod sagely and request a written response, preferably with fewer adjectives this time. Your scribe once described pickled beets as aromatic goblins of the garden. He's still finding glitter in his ink pot from the accompanying illumination. Outside, bells ring the hour. A pause. Lunch is technically next on the schedule, but the room lingers in political fervor. So you decide to settle one final issue, the matter of the Baroness's missing spoon collection. Her rival claims ignorance, but you note his pocket. Jingles when he walks. You offer a royal compromise, return the spoons, and he gets to keep the gravy ladle. Everyone agrees. A small but important victory. You rise from your throne. Everyone bows. You manage to dismount with only a mild stumble and make your way down the aisle, trailed by murmurs of respect, fear, and mild indigestion. Back in your private chamber, you peel off your ceremonial cloak, which is now gathering crumbs and a mysterious stain that smells faintly of eel. You sigh and sink into the nearest chair. A servant hands you a bowl of broth and a crust of bread. You eat slowly, watching a spider weave a web between two beams above you. A monarch, observing nature. Or maybe just tired and zoning out. Either way, you've survived your first morning of court. Barely. The door creaks open. Your steward returns with more parchment. The nobles wish to present their banners for approval this afternoon, he says, and Lord Aldrich wants to know if he can build a moat inside your moat. Of course he does. The nobles have assembled again, this time in your courtyard, parading their heraldic banners like proud schoolchildren at an arts and crafts fair. Fabric flaps in the wind, adorned with dragons, badgers, comets, suspiciously abstract cows, and at least one depiction of a man sneezing triumphantly. You admire their enthusiasm. You also wonder how many of these were painted by very bored nuns with a fondness for artistic liberties. You sit atop a cushioned bench, mercifully softer than yesterday's throne, beneath a canopy embroidered with golden suns. One noble at a time steps forward, unfurls their family standard, and awaits your royal verdict. You nod thoughtfully at each one, even when you're not quite sure what it's supposed to be. Baron Wimbert of Northhurst presents a banner featuring a turnip skewered on a sword. You raise an eyebrow. "A symbol of resilience, Your Majesty," he explains proudly. The turnip endured the siege of 97 when all else failed. Historians still argue whether the siege was real or just a food shortage with particularly dramatic flair. Lady Elsinore's banner shows a flaming duck. "It represents rebirth," she insists. "And also, my uncle accidentally set a lake on fire once." You approve it. Honestly, it's weirdly majestic. Between banners, a falconer passes by with a rather cross-looking bird. It glares at you like it knows what you did last summer. You offer it a crumb. It declines with disdain. "Fine. Be that way." Soon after, a banner is presented that depicts what appears to be you, in a toga, riding a lion. The lion has spectacles. The noble explains that it symbolizes your scholarly might and animal magnetism. You try not to laugh and request they tone it down. Just a little. Maybe no lion next time. A servant approaches with a tray of sweetened almond milk and candied fennel seeds. You nibble politely. The milk is surprisingly good. The fennel tastes like regret and crushed licorice. You quietly hide the rest under your seat cushion. As the parade of banners continues, you notice the queen observing from a balcony, her expression unreadable. A wind picks up and one banner flips inside out, revealing an accidentally lewd embroidery on the reverse. The noble responsible blushes furiously. You wave it off. "We've all sown things we regret," you mutter. The court laughs, relieved. Suddenly the castle's master of arms arrives, bowing so low you worry he might dislocate something. "Your Majesty," he says, "the squires await your inspection in the yard." "Oh, right. Squire training." You make your way to the outer yard where a dozen boys stand in awkward lines, armed with wooden swords and expressions ranging from terrified to trying too hard to look brave. Their helmets are slightly too big. One keeps slipping over a freckled face until only his chin is visible. You try not to chuckle. A senior knight demonstrates a series of training moves. The squires copy him with all the grace of drunken ducks. You clap encouragingly. One of them, perhaps misunderstanding your gesture, charges forward to impress you and trips directly into a horse trough. Splash. He emerges, sputtering, helmet now filled with pondweed. You help him up. "A promising dive," you say solemnly. "Perhaps naval combat is your future." He beams, soaking wet and deeply honored. Back near the stables, a blacksmith is fitting a new horseshoe. Sparks fly. The smell of hot iron and singed hay fills the air. You watch for a while, silently admiring the rhythm and care of the craft. It's almost meditative. No one argues over land or pigs here, just metal and purpose. Your steward reappears with another update. The castle architect wants approval for a new tower, taller than the last one. "What for?" you ask. "Better sunsets," the steward replies. You nod. Fair point. You return to the hall just in time to witness a spontaneous banner duel between two young nobles whose flags both include wolves. They argue over which wolf looks fiercer. You settle the matter by having the castle cat sit on each banner. Whichever she chooses is clearly the superior design. She promptly sits on neither, walks away, and throws up in a corner. Neutrality declared. One particularly bold noble presents a banner that features a sleeping hedgehog surrounded by stars. You love it. "Very accurate," you say. "That is essentially my royal policy." He is so thrilled he immediately offers to name his next child after you. You suggest Garth, just to see if he'll do it. By now you're growing tired. The banners blur together. Badgers, moons, jousting pies, a suspicious number of unicorns doing suspiciously human things. You approve them all except the one that features a goose holding a dagger. "We've had enough of vengeful geese," you explain. Historians still debate whether medieval heraldry actually held political significance or was just a competition to out-weird one another. Judging by today's entries, it's likely both. The last banner is rolled up and tied with a ribbon. You stretch, rising slowly from your bench as a gust of wind nearly carries your hat off. You catch it just in time and hear polite applause from the nobles. Your steward announces the session concluded. As you walk back toward your chamber, you spot a squire practicing his sword swings in the shadows. He doesn't notice you watching. There's real effort there, real care. You make a mental note to reward him later, perhaps with a new helmet, one that doesn't eat his face. Back in your quarters, the fire crackles warmly. You settle into your chair and sip from a new cup of mead. Lightly spiced, possibly too lightly. You swirl it, feeling oddly content. You've approved banners, rescued a squire from a trough, and survived a flaming duck. Not bad for a Thursday. A knock at the door. "Your Majesty, the royal falcon just stole the cook's hat again." Of course it did. The morning is still draped in a sleepy gray mist as you step into the castle chapel. Cold stone beneath your boots, incense heavy in the air, and the distant hum of Gregorian chant filtering through the vaulted arches. It's time for your daily dose of medieval piety. Whether you're here for genuine spiritual reflection or just to make sure the bishop doesn't try to sell indulgences out of your wine cellar again, who can say? You settle onto the carved wooden pew reserved for the royal posterior. It's only slightly more comfortable than a pile of hedgehogs, but you do your best to look serene. The priest begins with a solemn prayer in Latin, which sounds vaguely threatening, though you're assured it's about mercy. You nod at the right moments. The queen seated beside you murmurs along with practiced grace, while the royal dog sneezes loudly during the sanctus. After the service, you stay behind for a private consultation with Father Elric, the castle's spiritual advisor. He smells faintly of cloves and candle smoke and peers at you through spectacles thick enough to magnify his concern. Your Majesty, he begins, have you considered commissioning a new relic for the chapel? Something miraculous, preferably shiny. He shows you a fragment of wood allegedly from the true cross, though it looks suspiciously like firewood. Historians still argue whether the medieval relic trade was born of faith or very entrepreneurial carpentry. You nod politely and tell him you'll pray on it. You probably won't, but it's a nice way to end the conversation. You stroll through the cloisters afterward, where monks are hard at work illuminating manuscripts. One of them proudly shows you a marginalia sketch of a snail jousting a knight. It's weirdly compelling. Symbol of mortality, he whispers. Or lunch, no one's quite sure. You commission a copy. From the chapel, you head to the infirmary, a long, drafty hall lined with beds, herbs, and bandages that smell of vinegar and hope. You're here to check on Sir Balric, who claimed to be wounded in battle, but whose injuries resemble a bad tumble from the privy tower. Ambushed by brigands, he wheezes, 3 of them with javelins. You raise an eyebrow at the nurse, who mouths, slipped on his own scabbard. You pat Sir Balric on the arm and gift him a slice of cheese from your pocket. Cheese, after all, is the true balm of the soul. Then you continue your rounds. Next stop, the apothecary, a cozy chamber filled with jars, powders, dried frogs, and the unmistakable aroma of old socks soaked in sage. Mistress Gudrun, the castle's resident healer, offers you a taste of her newest tonic, something involving elderberries, nettleroot, and a very persuasive leech. It tastes like betrayal. You smile bravely. She shows you her newest concoction, a sleep aid brewed from lavender, mugwort, and a splash of poppy juice. You pocket a vial for later. Medieval insomnia is no joke, especially when the tapestries rustle at night and you suspect they're judging you. Outside, a boy in rags runs through the courtyard chasing a runaway goose. You pause, watching the chaos unfold as 3 guards join the pursuit, slipping and sliding across damp flagstones. The goose honks victoriously. You wonder briefly if it's the same one from the heraldry incident. Probably. Back in your study, you begin reviewing letters from your bishops. One writes to complain that a local miracle, a statue of the Virgin reportedly weeping fish oil, is distracting the congregation. Another claims a comet was seen over the eastern fenlands and wants to declare it an omen of your eternal reign. You consider replying with, only if the comet returns with taxes. You turn next to matters of charity. A monastery in the hills has run out of candles and asks for your help. You instruct your steward to send wax, wool, and a sack of those weird yellow apples from the Queen's orchard. They'll think it's a sign, you say. That or scurvy prevention. Either way, it's a win. Around midday, you attend a theology debate between 2 monks in the Great Hall. One argues that angels walk among men, disguised as beggars. The other believes they're more likely to be owls. This goes on for 45 minutes. You pretend to take notes. You doodle a small hedgehog in a crown instead. After the debate, the Queen invites you to join her for a short walk in the garden. Despite the season's chill, the herb beds are tidy and the rosemary thrives. She plucks a sprig and tucks it behind your ear. For memory, she says. You forget your boots again this morning. She's right. You did. As you pass the chapel again, you hear the organist rehearsing. The melody is haunting, slow, and filled with minor tones. You pause, momentarily hypnotized. The Queen squeezes your hand. No words, just warmth. Even kings need a minute sometimes. As dusk nears, you join the Vespers service. Candles flicker. Chanting fills the stone walls like water in a goblet. Low, echoing, strangely calming. A monk drops a hymnal. No one flinches. You feel yourself drifting slightly, lulled by the rhythm, the incense, the dimming light. This, you think, is the kind of peace that's earned, not commanded. Your final stop is the royal chapel's relic chamber. You stand before the bones of a saint, or at least someone whose femur is now gold-plated, and light a candle. You say nothing aloud, just a thought. May the kingdom hold. May your people sleep warm. May the tapestries never whisper too loudly. A bell tolls. Another day nearly done. You awaken to rain tapping against the leaded windows like an insistent courtier with a parchment full of bad news. The air in your chamber smells faintly of damp stone, beeswax, and the dog you forgot to kick out last night. He snores at the foot of your bed, wrapped like a sausage in your spare cloak. Today is market day, your chance to leave the castle walls and wander among the townsfolk, like a benevolent demigod in a very muddy robe. You dress in something slightly less kingly, but still with fur because standards, and instruct your guard to walk 10 paces behind. To look casual, you say. They nod, adjusting their halberds like men who've never once been casual in their lives. You step outside and immediately regret your boots. Mud swallows them to the ankles. Somewhere in the distance, someone is either slaughtering a pig or attempting opera. Possibly both. The town market sprawls along the main road, like a festive rash, tents, stalls, barrels, and shouting. The smell is a complex bouquet of roasted onions, horse dung, and honeyed nuts. You breathe it in. Royal sinuses, do your best. You pass a vendor selling eels from a rain-slicked bucket. "Very lively, sire," she cries, holding up one that wriggles like it knows it's doomed. You nod and buy 3 because why not? Royal breakfast. A toothless man offers you something he swears is miracle cheese made by monks who sleep upside down. You buy it, mostly to stop him from explaining further. Tastes like feet. Holy feet, perhaps. Further along, a cloth merchant unrolls bolts of fabric dyed in saffron, indigo, and something she calls unicorn blush. It's basically beige. You admire the marketing. Children run past, giggling and waving carved turnip lanterns. One stops to stare at you. "Are you the king?" he asks, mouth full of bread. You nod solemnly. He thinks for a moment. You look shorter in the tapestries. Then he runs off. You make a note to commission taller tapestries. You pause by a stall selling carved figurines, saints, animals, peasants carrying improbably large cabbages. You buy a tiny wooden goat, for luck. The vendor tells you it's cursed. You buy it anyway. Every kingdom needs a cursed goat. At the town square, you climb a wooden platform and greet the crowd. A cheer rises, not thunderous but respectful, like they're glad you didn't raise taxes this week. You thank them for their loyalty, their hard work, and their patience with the castle's occasional falling masonry incidents. They laugh. Nervously, you proclaim a day of reduced tolls and order the castle baker to distribute free honey cakes to every child. The cheers get louder. Nothing inspires loyalty like flour and syrup. Later, you visit the guild hall, an imposing, timber-framed structure filled with men in aprons, pointed hats, and suspiciously luxurious beards. They argue constantly but make excellent ale. Today they're voting on whether to add a new guild of goosekeepers. Debate is fierce. One member has goose scars and insists it's a legitimate trade. Historians still argue whether guild systems truly empowered workers or were just social clubs with initiation pastries. You cast your vote in favor of the goosekeepers, partly out of fairness, mostly because you want to see the coat of arms. Outside, the rain lets up, revealing the crooked skyline of your town. Wooden homes, thatched roofs, crooked chimneys exhaling little threads of smoke. A woman waves from an upper window, laundry flapping around her like flags of domestic victory. A dog barks at your procession and is immediately distracted by a pie cart. At the far edge of the market, you visit the apothecary's public stall. Mistress Gudrun is here too, selling wormwood tonics and lye soap to townsfolk. You observe from A distance as she helps a young boy with a splinter, muttering words that might be magic or just very colorful swearing. Either way it works. You speak to the town reeve next, who updates you on minor disputes. A baker accused of putting pebbles in his loaves to increase weight. A tanner's dog accused of biting 3 mares, none local. And a mysterious man in a hat who's been selling dragon bones that are very clearly goat ribs. You nod, promise to look into it, and absolutely plan to buy one of those bones later for your desk. A commotion breaks out near the east gate. You and your guards hurry over. A troupe of traveling players has arrived, musicians, jugglers, and actors in threadbare finery. They ask permission to perform in the square. You grant it gladly. They put on a play about a foolish emperor who bans socks, only to freeze on his throne. It's a comedy, but the emperor bears a suspicious resemblance to you. You pretend not to notice. You even laugh. Loudly. You're a very good sport. As the performance ends, you toss a pouch of coins to the players and announce they may stay the week, provided they promise not to set fire to anything larger than a duck. Evening falls and the market begins to pack up. You linger a little longer, buying a meat pie from a woman whose accent suggests she's from the western marshes. It's flaky, rich, and probably made of something ambiguous. You love it. Back at the castle, you unload your market haul. A goat, figurine, 3 slightly guilty eels, 1 pouch of miracle cheese, and a roll of unicorn blush cloth you'll probably never use. The queen raises an eyebrow. You shrug. Retail therapy. You end your day in the solar, the fire crackling, the dog snoring once more. You hold the tiny goat up to the candlelight. Definitely cursed. You place it on your desk anyway. And just before bed, your steward knocks with news. The Goosekeeper Guild has selected a mascot. It's wearing a tiny helmet. Of course it is. Your Majesty, the day begins with the sound of clashing steel echoing from the training yard. A cheerful reminder that some people voluntarily wake up to get hit with sticks. You stretch, yawn, and toss on a tunic lined with ermine so soft it makes clouds jealous. Breakfast is already laid out. Cheese, crusty bread, cold-boiled eggs, and a tankard of small beer. The royal dog eyes the eggs. You pretend not to notice as one mysteriously vanishes under the table. Today is all about court justice, a glorious procession of complaints, accusations, and theatrics served in equal measure. You settle onto your high-backed throne in the Great Hall, surrounded by tapestries depicting battles you've only mildly exaggerated in retelling. The hall smells of old oak, damp cloaks, and political tension. First up, a farmer accuses his neighbor of sorcery after his goat developed an unusual fondness for singing. The accused, a woman with 1 eyebrow and a suspiciously knowledgeable air, insists it's just a talented goat. Historians still argue whether medieval witch trials were genuinely feared or just particularly nasty popularity contests. You sentence the goat to perform at the next feast and tell the neighbors to share their barley. Justice served. Applause. Optional. Next case, a dispute between 2 bakers over the rights to a particular type of spiced bun. One presents a crusty Exhibit A, the other arrives with a chorus of apprentices singing a bun-themed ballad. You rule that the town shall enjoy both versions and that any further bun duels will result in community service, scraping the latrines after feast day. You break for lunch, roasted chicken, pickled turnips, and a fruit tart so sweet it might violate canon law. Then back to the throne. A knight demands trial by combat after being accused of stealing a priest's goose. The priest insists it wasn't just any goose. It was trained to detect heresy. You allow the trial by combat, but only with blunted maces and padded armor. It's a ridiculous affair. The goose squawks commentary from the sidelines. In the end, the knight slips in goose droppings and loses. You declare the goose victorious and award it a ceremonial ribbon. Somewhere, a new legend is born. Later, a merchant petitions to build a fountain in the square shaped like a lion wrestling a fish. A symbol of our strength, he claims. You counteroffer with a fish wrestling a lion, just to see the expression on his face. He agrees anyway. Apparently, fish symbolism is trending. You preside over more minor cases, stolen onions, fence line disputes, and one man who insists he's owed compensation after a local bard rhymed his name with flatulence in a popular song. The bard defends himself by performing the piece in court. It's catchy. You fine him a silver coin and request an encore. In the late afternoon, you meet privately with your chancellor, who presents a scroll longer than your arm. "Legal revisions, sire," he says, pushing his spectacles up his nose. You review new edicts, tax exemptions for widows, a stricter ban on counterfeit relics, looking at you, Saint Toe merchants, and an official ruling on whether ferrets count as livestock. You approve all but the last one. That, you decide, requires a public debate. To unwind, you take a walk along the battlements. Rain clouds roll in over the forest beyond the town, and your castle feels both invincible and very, very drafty. A falcon circles above, and you pause to admire it. A guard sidles up beside you. "Message from the western marshes, sire," he says, handing over a wax-sealed scroll. You crack it open. It's a legal appeal. A noble claims his neighbor enchanted his pigs to dance during the night. You sigh, already imagining the next round of court antics. You scribble a reply. "Have pigs perform for court. If they waltz, neighbor is guilty." Back inside, you sit in the royal study and write a decree on a fresh vellum sheet. Your script is neat, even artistic, despite the ink blot that looks like a duck. All villagers shall be permitted to appeal directly to the crown once per year, provided they bring a gift of local produce. You add a footnote. "No more turnips, please." The queen joins you, sipping mulled wine. She reads over your shoulder, chuckles, and suggests a clause allowing the royal court to host a comedy night once a month. "Laughter is justice for the soul," she says. You agree. The bard will be thrilled. Later that evening, you host an informal gathering in the hall for your advisors and senior staff. There's bread, ale, mild gossip, and a great deal of unsolicited advice about the Bun War. The steward proposes a new judicial title, Lord Keeper of Unusual Complaints. You suspect he wants the job. As the fire dies down, you retire to your chamber, where the candlelight flickers against the carved stone walls. You review one last parchment, an anonymous suggestion that perhaps you appear too lenient. You shrug and toss it into the hearth. Better to be beloved than feared. Unless it's by geese. You crawl into bed, the dog thudding down beside you, still wearing the ribbon from his goose altercation. You consider a final decree. All dogs henceforth to be addressed as Sir within castle walls. You smile. Tomorrow brings more judgments, more tales, more pies in dispute. But for now, justice sleeps. Dawn spills gold across the stone walls of your chamber as you awake to the soft chirping of birds, most of which you suspect are spies sent by the neighboring lord to report on your fashion choices. You stretch your arms, feeling the familiar weight of your crown pressing gently against your brow. Today is no ordinary day, it's festival day, and the whole town is buzzing with excitement like bees around a forgotten honeypot. You dress with care, choosing robes dyed in rich blues and deep purples, colors that speak of your status without shouting it. The fabric rustles softly as you move, a comforting sound amid the hum of the waking castle. You step outside onto the balcony, breathing in the crisp air mingled with the faint scent of roasting meats and fresh hay. The festival is dedicated to St. Aldwyn, patron of good harvests and even better stories, a saint whose legend includes turning a jealous neighbor's cabbage patch into a field of sunflowers overnight. Historians still argue whether St. Aldwyn actually existed or was a composite of several local miracle workers. But the festival is all the more charming for the mystery. The streets below are alive with vibrant stalls, garlands of flowers, and laughter. Children dart through the crowd, faces painted like foxes and badgers, clutching wooden swords and stuffed rabbits. The scent of sweetmeats and spiced cider fills the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil. You descend the grand staircase, greeted by your steward, who hands you a wreath of wildflowers. Placing it carefully on your head, you join the procession that winds its way through the town. Musicians play lutes and drums, and dancers whirl in colorful skirts, their feet kicking up dust that sparkles like gold in the sunlight. At the center of the festival stands a towering maypole, adorned with ribbons and carved figures. You watch as the townsfolk take turns weaving the ribbons in intricate patterns, a tradition believed to bring good luck and ward off mischievous spirits. A particularly enthusiastic fiddler trips and crashes into a pile of hay, earning a round of amused applause. Nearby, a group of artisans demonstrate their crafts. A potter shapes clay on a spinning wheel, a blacksmith hammers glowing metal into delicate shapes, and a weaver threads vibrant strands into cloth. You pause to admire a tapestry depicting a dragon curled around a castle, its scales shimmering with thread of silver and gold. The artist beams at your praise, secretly hoping you'll commission a full wall. Children gather for storytelling beneath a large oak tree, listening wide-eyed as the village elder spins tales of legendary knights, enchanted forests, and the occasional talking animal. You join them briefly, telling a story of a clever fox who outwitted a greedy king. Not you, of course, but a distant ancestor with questionable taste in hats. As the sun reaches its zenith, the festival shifts to games. You watch knights joust. With wooden lances, peasants compete in sack races, and archers aim at targets while balancing on one leg. You try your hand at the archery contest, managing to hit the target, but only after the arrow bounced off the edge and startled a nearby chicken into a frantic escape. Lunchtime brings a feast under long tables laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, cheese, and bowls of hearty stew. You savor the flavors, noting the subtle hints of herbs grown in the castle gardens. Nearby, a bard strums a gentle tune, his voice carrying stories of distant lands and forgotten heroes. The afternoon's highlight is the crowning of the festival, Queen, a young woman chosen for her kindness, grace, and ability to juggle apples without bruising them. You applaud warmly as she accepts a delicate circlet of flowers, her cheeks flushed with pride. As dusk falls, lanterns are lit, casting a soft glow over the revelers. A bonfire crackles and the townsfolk gather around, singing songs and sharing laughter. You join in, your voice blending with the chorus, feeling a rare sense of belonging beyond the weight of the crown. Later, as the festival winds down, you stroll through the quiet streets now bathed in moonlight. The scent of smoke and earth lingers, mingling with the cool night air. You pause by the maypole, its ribbons fluttering gently in the breeze, a silent promise of hope and renewal. Returning to the castle, you find the royal dog waiting patiently, a tired but content look in his eyes. You settle into your chambers, the echoes of the festival still ringing softly in your mind. With a final glance at the stars, you close your eyes, drifting into a peaceful sleep filled with dreams of laughter, music, and the simple joys of a kingdom alive with celebration. The morning air carries a crisp chill as you rise, the weight of your royal robes heavy but familiar. Today, your mind is set on matters of the realm's health and well-being, a subject that, unlike jousting or feasts, lacks immediate entertainment, but promises long-term rewards. You move through the corridors, your footsteps muffled by thick tapestries, heading toward the apothecary's chamber, where Mistress Elsbeth awaits with jars, herbs, and curious powders that smell faintly of forest and mystery. You recall that medieval medicine was a curious blend of observation, superstition, and occasional genius. Physicians often prescribed remedies based on the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, each needing balance for good health. You're not entirely sure how yellow bile works, but you've noticed that too much talk about it tends to clear a room quickly. Historians still argue whether the humor theory actually helped patients or simply kept doctors busy inventing colorful concoctions. Mistress Elsbeth shows you a vial filled with a dark liquid made from crushed beetles, used to treat fevers, and hands you a small pouch of dried lavender, reputed to soothe troubled minds and restless nights. You sniff it. It's faintly sweet and surprisingly comforting. She also demonstrates a poultice made from onions and honey, an old family recipe rumored to speed healing. You wonder whether the smell alone might chase away illness or just drive everyone out of the room. Next, you tour the castle's infirmary, where a handful of attendants tend to the sick and injured. One man, clutching a bandaged hand, claims, He was attacked by a wild pig. The attendants exchanged skeptical glances. You suspect it was more likely a tavern brawl. Nearby, a woman rests quietly, comforted by a warm cloth scented with rosemary, a herb believed to improve memory and ward off evil spirits. You make a mental note to plant more rosemary in the castle gardens. It might not cure everything, but it certainly makes the halls smell better. You sit with the chief surgeon, who proudly displays his collection of tools, saws, knives, and forceps that look more suited to a medieval torture museum than a hospital. He explains how he performs bloodletting, a favored treatment meant to rebalance humors by removing excess blood. You wince inwardly, but nod politely, recalling that despite its reputation, bloodletting was a standard practice for centuries. The surgeon mentions he's experimenting with gentle cauterization techniques, though he confesses it's hard to keep patients calm when flames are involved. Historians still argue whether these surgical advances truly extended lives or simply made dying a bit less painful. You're invited to observe a demonstration of herbal remedies, where Mistress Elsbeth prepares a calming tea from chamomile and mint. You take a cautious sip, feeling the warmth spread through you like a cozy blanket. It's surprisingly pleasant, and you resolve to have it served more often during council meetings. Perhaps it will make your advisors less grumpy. In the sea. Afternoon, you convene with your council to discuss public health measures. They debate proposals to improve sanitation, regulate market hygiene, and encourage the planting of medicinal herbs in village gardens. One councillor suggests importing silk bandages from the east, promising they promote faster healing and carry fewer infections. You approve a trial shipment, curious whether these exotic luxuries will indeed make a difference. You also hear troubling news of an outbreak of the sweating sickness in a neighboring duchy, a mysterious ailment causing fever and sudden sweats. Your physicians prepare warnings and herbal remedies, and you order guards to monitor borders discreetly, hoping to keep your land safe. You wonder how many kings have lost sleep over diseases they barely understood, and you count yourself lucky to have better knowledge and resources, even if imperfect. As evening falls, you stroll through the castle gardens, inhaling the scents of rosemary, thyme, and newly planted lavender. You feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing that health, like the kingdom itself, requires careful tending and patience. You return inside, finding the dog asleep by the hearth, a faint whimper escaping as he dreams, perhaps of chasing wild pigs or stealing royal eggs. You chuckle softly, the sound warm in the quiet room. You settle into your chair with a cup of chamomile tea, gazing out at the moonlit courtyard. The world feels fragile, yet resilient, much like your people, your kingdom, and yourself. Tonight you sleep with a mind at ease, trusting in the gentle art of healing and the quiet hope it brings. The sun rises slowly over your kingdom, casting a gentle amber glow on the stone walls and bustling streets. Today your thoughts turn to the intricate dance of diplomacy, a task requiring equal parts patience, charm, and the occasional well-timed bribe wrapped in honeyed words. You find yourself in the council chamber, where envoys from distant lands wait with guarded smiles and elaborate robes, their intentions as veiled as the embroidered patterns on their cloaks. You greet the first envoy, a merchant prince from a far-off desert city known for trading exotic spices and silk. His stories are as rich as the fabrics he wears, and you listen attentively as he speaks of caravan routes winding through scorching sands and towering dunes. Historians still argue whether these early trade networks truly connected cultures, or were simply the stuff of grand legends told by traveling bards. You consider how your own kingdom benefits quietly from these silk routes, with rare goods trickling in to adorn the halls and kitchens alike. Next arrives a dignitary from a northern kingdom, wrapped in furs thick enough to smother a small horse. He brings gifts of finely crafted ironwork and furs, tokens of friendship and mutual respect. You note the sharp contrast between his practical gifts and the merchant prince's flamboyant spices, a reminder that alliances are as varied as the lands they come from. As the day unfolds, you mediate discussions on trade agreements, border disputes, and shared defense pacts. You watch the envoys carefully, noting the subtle gestures and half-smiles that reveal as much as their words. At one point, the northern envoy offers a proposal for joint hunting expeditions in the vast forests, bordering your lands, citing the noble tradition of falconry and camaraderie. You agree with a knowing smile, secretly looking forward to the chance to escape the endless paperwork. Over a midday meal of venison stew and honeyed bread, you overhear a whispered rumor that the merchant prince's spices include a rare herb, rumored to sharpen the mind and calm the nerves, a perfect remedy for court jitters. You make a mental note to request a sample. After all, a clear head never hurt a king. Later, you retreat to your private study to draft letters of goodwill to neighboring rulers. Your secretary, a quick-witted scribe with a penchant for adding playful flourishes to your signature, suggests including a line about sending peaceful pigeons as messengers. You laugh quietly and agree, imagining the confusion of a rival king receiving an actual pigeon with a sealed scroll tied to its leg. As dusk falls, the envoys are entertained with a small feast featuring music, dancing, and the ever-popular juggling, bears, a curious tradition you neither endorse nor fully understand but appreciate for its ability to distract and delight. Before the night deepens, you stroll through the castle gardens, pondering the delicate balance of power and friendship that diplomacy demands. You consider how, much like a well-tended garden, alliances require careful nurturing, occasional pruning, and a good deal of patience. You return to your chambers feeling the weight of responsibility mingled with a quiet satisfaction. Your dog curls up at your feet, sighing contentedly as you prepare for rest. Tonight you dream not of battles or feasts, but of distant lands, shimmering silk, and the subtle art of keeping peace. The dawn light filters through stained glass windows, casting colorful patches onto the worn stone floor of your great hall as you prepare for the day's most delicate task, justice. As king, you hold the ultimate authority to settle disputes, dispense punishments, and maintain order, an office that requires wisdom, fairness, and occasionally, the ability to keep a poker face when faced with bizarre claims. Your first case involves a dispute between two farmers over a boundary line, marked by a particularly crooked oak tree. You listen patiently as each argues their side, occasionally glancing at the tree, which indeed looks more like a twisty old dragon than a reliable landmark. You remember that medieval boundary laws often hinged on natural markers, leading to frequent quarrels when trees fell or rivers shifted course. Historians still argue whether these disputes fueled local tensions or helped communities develop more structured property rights. Next, a merchant accuses a rival of cheating with false scales. The accused protests vehemently, insisting his weights are honest, but you know well that honesty in trade is often more of an ideal than a reality. You summon the town's official weights and measures and conduct a careful inspection, trying not to smirk at the variety of contraptions, some of which look more like medieval Rube Goldberg machines than tools of fairness. One particularly curious case involves a baker accused of selling bread that was too light. The baker defends himself, explaining that flour was scarce due to a poor harvest, but his customers insist they are being shortchanged. You recall that bread was the staple of the medieval diet, and its quality and weight were matters of great concern, sometimes sparking riots. You decide to order an inspection of the grain supplies and promise a review of pricing regulations, hoping to balance fairness with practical realities. Later, a noblewoman arrives to plead for leniency for her husband, accused of poaching deer in the royal forest. Poaching was a serious offense, as forest laws protected game for the nobility's hunting pleasure. Yet, you also recognize the hardships faced by common folk, who sometimes risked punishment to feed their families. Historians still debate whether these laws were cruel impositions or necessary conservation measures. As the day wears on, you preside over smaller disputes, from accusations of noisy livestock disturbing neighbors to complaints about late-night tavern brawls. Your advisors whisper advice in your ear, though you remind yourself that a king's judgment must come from a blend of law, mercy, and common sense. In the afternoon, you conduct a ceremonial punishment. Nothing harsh, just a public warning, for a thief caught stealing from the market stalls. The culprit stands in the stocks, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, as townsfolk pass by with knowing smiles. You consider that such punishments were designed less to harm and more to shame, reinforcing community standards. You finish your day by drafting new ordinances aimed at improving market fairness and encouraging honesty. Your secretary suggests adding a clause about no glittering scales to prevent flashy but misleading equipment, which you find amusing enough to include. As evening falls, you walk through the quiet castle corridors, reflecting on the weight of justice and the challenge of ruling a kingdom where right and wrong often blur in the mist of daily life. Your dog follows closely, as if sensing the gravity of your thoughts before settling down with a contented sigh. You retire to your chambers, your mind easing from the complex judgments of the day into a peaceful rest, confident that justice, like sleep, is best served with calm and care. The morning light filters gently through your chamber window as you awake to the distant tolling of the chapel bell. Today, your focus shifts to the rhythms and rituals of medieval religion, a force as integral to your kingdom as stone and steel. You rise and don your ceremonial robes, feeling the soft weight of embroidered crosses and golden threads, symbols of both faith and authority. You join the procession to the chapel, walking through cloisters fragrant with incense and the faint hum of Gregorian chant. The faithful gather, their voices rising and falling like the gentle sway of a ship on calm seas. You participate in the Mass, feeling the solemnity and peace it brings, a welcome contrast to the bustle of court life. Historians still argue whether the medieval church's influence was primarily a source of comfort or a tool of control. But for you, it is both sanctuary and foundation. After the service, you meet with the bishop to discuss the spiritual needs of your people. He shares concerns about heresy rumors spreading in the countryside, a reminder of the fragile balance between belief and dissent. You listen carefully, aware that religious unity helps maintain social order, but that zealotry can quickly lead to unrest. Back in your private chambers, you examine relics displayed in a gilded box, fragments of saints' bones and bits of cloth believed to carry holy power. The faithful travel great distances to glimpse these treasures, seeking miracles and blessings. You smile softly, thinking of the many stories woven around these objects, some likely more fiction than fact, yet all sustaining faith and hope. In the afternoon, you attend a festival honoring the Virgin Mary, where villagers dress in white and sing hymns beneath a sky dotted with fluffy clouds. Children carry small statues and flowers, their laughter mingling with prayers. You watch a local priest bless the fields, sprinkling holy water to ensure a bountiful harvest, a practice blending faith with the rhythms of nature. Later, you meet with a group of monks working to illuminate manuscripts, painstakingly copying, and decorating sacred texts with vibrant colors and intricate designs. Their devotion preserves knowledge through long hours by candlelight, a quiet rebellion against the fading shadows of time. You admire their dedication and consider commissioning a new psalter to grace your chapel. As evening descends, you walk through the monastery gardens, their tranquility a balm to your weary mind. You pause by a fountain where water trickles gently, over smooth stones reflecting the pale moonlight. The scent of lilies and herbs fills the air, mingling with the distant toll of bells. Your dog pads softly beside you, nose twitching at the fragrant air, before curling up at your feet in the quiet hush. You return to your chamber, the soft glow of candlelight flickering on the walls, and settle into a calm, reflective state. The day's spiritual rhythms lull you toward rest, weaving a gentle tapestry of faith, hope, and peace. Tonight, you sleep wrapped in the quiet embrace of tradition, the whisper of prayers fading softly into dreams. The first light of dawn reveals a castle bustling with preparation. Today is festival day, a time for celebration, spectacle, and the occasional odd tradition that makes you wonder how these customs ever took root. You don your best robes embroidered with the kingdom's crest, and step outside to the sounds of minstrels tuning lutes and villagers chattering excitedly. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meats and fresh bread, promising a feast to come. Your day begins with the ceremonial blessing of the harvest, a ritual combining solemn prayers with playful antics. A group of peasants dress as mythical creatures, dragons, fairies, and a particularly convincing hobgoblin, dancing through the fields to encourage the crops to grow tall and strong. You smile at their earnestness, wondering if the magic lies more in community spirit than the costumes. Historians still argue whether such festivals had religious roots or were simply excuses for merrymaking. As the festivities unfold, you wander through the market stalls, sampling spiced cider and watching craftsmen demonstrate their skills. A blacksmith shapes glowing iron with rhythmic hammer strikes while a weaver's fingers dance deftly over the loom. Nearby, a juggler tosses flaming torches high into the air, eliciting gasps and applause. You recall that entertainment in medieval times often blended skill with a touch of danger, designed to hold attention when the sun dipped low. The highlight of the day is the joust, where armored knights charge with lances aimed squarely at honor, and sometimes at the poor horses, who don't seem to appreciate the sport as much as the crowds do. You watch as helmets gleam and banners flutter, feeling a rush of excitement mixed with relief that you're watching from a safe distance, rather than strapped onto a charging steed. You muse that jousting was as much about spectacle and political signaling as it was about actual combat skill. Between bouts, you chat with visiting nobles, exchanging news and laughter. One noblewoman offers you a curious drink made from fermented honey and herbs, reputed to aid digestion and encourage pleasant dreams. You sip it cautiously, noting the warmth that spreads through your chest and the faint hint of cinnamon. As evening approaches, torches light the castle walls and the feast begins. Long tables groan under platters of roasted boar, pies filled with spiced fruits, and trays of honey cakes. Minstrels play softly, and dancers twirl gracefully, their movements weaving patterns in the flickering torchlight. You savor the flavors and the lively atmosphere, a welcome break from the usual weight of rule. Later, as the last embers fade, you stroll through the quiet castle gardens, now bathed in moonlight. The sense of the day's festivities linger, faintly in the cool night air. Roast meat, sweet honey, and a trace of smoke. Your dog, tired from the day's excitement, rests peacefully by your side. You settle into your chambers with a contented sigh, the echoes of laughter and music fading softly into a peaceful quiet. Tonight, you drift to sleep, wrapped in the warm embrace of tradition, community, and the gentle joy of celebration. Morning creeps in with the soft chirping of birds outside your chamber window, and today's focus turns inward to the private world of your personal routine, the small, often overlooked moments that shape your days as king. You rise from your bed, the heavy woolen blankets reluctantly slipping from your shoulders, and stretch, feeling the weight of responsibility settle comfortably alongside the stiffness of last night's feast. Your chamber is modest yet elegant, with tapestries depicting scenes of past victories and a sturdy wooden table cluttered with scrolls and quills. You begin with a ritual wash. Cold water poured from a pewter basin, refreshing yet bracing enough to chase away the remnants of sleep. You recall that medieval hygiene, while limited by today's standards, included surprisingly thoughtful practices. Fragrant herbs in bath water, and the use of a strigil-like tool to scrape the skin, though historians still argue how widespread and effective these were. Breakfast is simple: coarse bread, sharp cheese, and a mug of watered-down ale. Enough to start the day, but gentle on your royal constitution. As you eat, your mind drifts to the domestic affairs that fill your schedule: overseeing repairs in the castle, attending to letters from far-flung vassals, and managing your household staff who keep the castle running smoothly. Mid-morning, you meet with your steward to review accounts and plan provisions. The steward, a shrewd man with a penchant for dry humor, remarks on the recent shipment of salt arriving from coastal ports, a precious commodity essential not just for seasoning, but for preserving food through the long winters. You smile, remembering how the salt trade quietly underpinned much of your kingdom's economy, far more valuable than gold to the common folk. In the afternoon, you indulge in a quiet moment of leisure, practicing falconry in the castle's grounds. Your bird of prey, a sleek goshawk, perches obediently on your gloved hand, its sharp eyes scanning the horizon. Falconry is more than sport. It is a symbol of nobility and control over nature, a subtle reminder of your status. Yet you find peace in these moments, the wind brushing your face and the rhythmic beat of wings above. Later, a visit from the court physician brings news of new herbal remedies being experimented with, including a curious poultice made from willow, bark said to ease aches and pains, a medieval precursor to aspirin. You ponder the slow, often unpredictable progress of medicine in your time, knowing full well that some cures remain as mysterious as the illnesses themselves. As evening falls, you retire to your private study, a warm fire crackling nearby. You write letters by candlelight, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the parchment. Your dog curls beside you, a loyal companion through the quiet hours. The day closes with a sense of routine and calm, the steady pulse of daily life, anchoring you amid the ever-shifting tides of rule. Tonight, you rest with a heart steadied by simple rituals, finding comfort in the quiet certainty of your personal kingdom within the larger realm. The castle is wrapped in the gentle hush of dawn as you awaken, feeling the familiar softness of your bed and the faint chill of morning air slipping through the stone walls. Today, your thoughts turn to legacy, the stories, monuments, and memories you will leave behind when the crown passes to another. You move slowly through your chambers, your fingers tracing the carved wooden surfaces of your writing desk, worn smooth by years of use. You recall how medieval kings often commissioned grand works, cathedrals that scraped the heavens, illuminated, manuscripts bursting with color, and statues that caught sunlight and shadow just so. These were not mere vanity projects. They were carefully crafted symbols of divine favor and earthly power. Historians still debate whether these monuments were acts of piety or political strategy, but to you, they are a testament to a life lived amid triumphs and trials. Your morning begins with a meeting of your court artists and architects. You discuss plans for a new chapel, one to honor a saint whose miracles inspire the faithful across your lands. The master mason speaks of flying buttresses and intricate stained glass, while the painter envisions scenes of heavenly glory. You listen with fascination, imagining how the chapel's light will dance at dawn and dusk, casting colors across prayerful faces. Later, you review records and letters from past reigns, learning from their successes and missteps. The scrolls whisper tales of alliances forged and lost, of battles won through cunning rather than force, and of rulers whose names are remembered not just for power, but for wisdom and kindness. You wonder how your own story will be told, whether your reign will be a gentle tide or a roaring river in the annals of history. As the day warms, you stroll through the castle grounds, where artisans carve stone and craftsmen shape wood for the new chapel's construction. Children play nearby, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the steady rhythm of work. You pause by a newly planted tree, a symbol of growth and endurance, and imagine it growing tall long after you are gone. The evening. You gather with your closest advisors and family for a quiet meal, sharing stories and quiet laughter. The conversation turns to hopes for the future, of peace, prosperity, and the continued flourishing of your kingdom. You feel the weight of responsibility mingle with a hopeful lightness. As night falls, you retreat to your chamber, the flickering, candlelight casting gentle shadows. Your dog lies at your feet, a silent companion through the years. You lie down, the softness of your bed welcoming you, and allow your mind to drift through memories and dreams. The legacy you build is not only in stone and parchment, but in the daily acts of kindness, justice, and care. Tonight, you rest peacefully, cradled by the knowledge that your story, like all stories, is part of a larger, unfolding tapestry. Now, as the quiet night deepens, feel yourself soften and slow, the weight of the day gently melting away. Imagine the castle around you settling into stillness, the flicker of candle flames dimming, the soft creak of wood, and the distant murmur of sleeping halls. Your breath grows steady, calm, a rhythm in tune with the quiet world outside. The images of stone walls bathed in moonlight, gardens fragrant with night blossoms, and the faithful hush of prayer drift slowly through your mind. There is comfort in the continuity of time, in knowing that each dawn brings new chances and every night holds the promise of rest. With your dog curled beside you, warm and steady, let your thoughts wander to gentle places, a quiet stream, a softly glowing fire, the hush of ancient forests under starlight. Here, in this space, you are safe, held by the enduring embrace of history and peace. Rest now, wrapped in the calm rhythm of centuries past and dreams to come. Your story, like the castle stones beneath your feet, endures quietly and surely. Sweet dreams, dear listener.